Hey guys, Gabe here again. Just making this video because I wanted to show you guys my Criterion Collection. I have a lot of them. I'll show you them all now. I think it's a little over 60, I believe. And I did my record collection video. I enjoyed that a lot, just talking about them. So I'm going to do that today with my Criterion Collection. So I'm just going to jump right in. I kind of sort them, kind of region, director, stuff like that, so it's kind of in order a bit. But the first film we're starting off with is Godland, directed by, what is his name? H. Paul Mawson. I don't know his entire name, but I saw this during the summer. I think it was on the Criterion channel. It was like a Janus contemporary film. And I liked it a lot. It's a film that it's about the environment, the Godland. It's like Iceland or whatever when they're like colonizing it, kind of. They're making their way over there. And the landscape it captures is truly like the most like accurate depiction I've seen of like the natural, unforgiving world. And just watching it made me want to like curl up in a blanket and just like the scene where like he gets back from like one of these long travels and he's like sleeping under this house under like with like hay under a blanket and it looks really comfy, and that's kind of what made me want to do the entire time, because it's a very harsh film but also a very beautiful film, kind of connecting like nature versus man. Should he be doing this, spreading his religion to a place where it's not needed? And I think the ending does work. I'm not going to spoil it, but I've seen talk about the ending and if it works or not, and I think it does work for the message it is trying to convey. But yeah, I enjoyed the film a lot. I'm happy I got it on DVD. It's a good overall film. I recommend it. It is a bit long. It's 143 minutes, so 2 hours and a half about. And it is a film that, feels long, because a lot of it's just like long shots, landscape shots. Second half is there's a lot more dialogue. More things happen, but a lot of it is just like sitting down or walking through nature or sitting down next to a candlelight. It does a good job at like making it feel back like you're actually like there. Kind of reminds you like The Witch, how the set was like built to be exactly like the time period. This is very much like that. So if you enjoy period pieces, nature, this is a good one to watch. Next, Revanche, Gott Spielman. I always say that the main guy in this, I don't know the actor's name. He's Austrian because it's an Austrian film. But he looks like an Austrian Brad Pitt. Almost kind of like a young, what's his name? The guy, Bruno Gantz, a bit. But yeah, Revanche, a very good film. It's a film that kind of starts off, I think it started off a little slow for me personally, but once the inciting event that causes this guy's need for revenge or revanche, it really does kick off, and it's a very different take on revenge. I think that's what separates it from the typical revenge story or film. Because if it took the traditional route, I don't think there'd be much to really look at. But the way this goes, it's very enjoyable. A very good thriller. I highly recommend. Very good shots. Very lot of wide shots, never getting too close to the characters, which I really appreciate until the very end. And it's not too long either, only about 2 hours, and it seems like Ghost Spielman, he hasn't really made a lot of other like really good films like this, at least from looking at his letterboxd. I haven't seen any of his work, so I do hope to watch more of his movies one day, because this is a really good film. Next, Code Inconnu by Michael Haneke. I never really know how to pronounce his name. I've seen different ways to say it, so I'm just going to say Haneke for this video. But Code Inconnu, one of his French films. He's made a couple French films, Austrian films, one in English, Funny Games remake, of course. But Code Inconnu, Haneke is my favorite director of all time, so I do have a couple of his DVDs with me. I think I have every single one that is available in the collection, because he is just my favorite director. The way he moves and doesn't move the camera is just sensational. And Code Inconnu is not one of my favorite. It's not my favorite work by him, and it's not even like one of my favorite movies. I think it's a decent movie. I don't think it's like, if you want to watch a Haneke movie, Code Inconnu is probably not the best way to start off. I haven't rewatched it yet, but I feel like I do need to rewatch it to appreciate it more, because it was one of the first films I've seen by him. so I was a little bit like out of like what is his style. I don't really get it exactly, but it's like a film that's very much him diving even more into his style, diving in even more into the topics like colonialism and human like miscommunication, contact, stuff like that. He does really well in Cachet. So I think if you want a film by him about colonialism and topics surrounding that, I think Cachet is a better film, but Code Inconnu is a really good, also another really good way he talks about that. Like Code Inconnu means code unknown. So it's kind of like this unknown code, like unknown meaning, because it's a bunch of like little like people stories all connected together by one event. And it is a bit confusing, especially the first time I watched it, so I think I do need to rewatch it, but it is a good one. Next, The Piano Teacher, a film that is in French, but it takes place in Austria. I never really got that, but I was like, why don't you just film in France or just make it Austrian? But he didn't really want to work with Isabelle Huppert. She's a really great actress, and in this, she is phenomenal. I think it's the best performance of her career, easily. And The Piano Teacher, I actually rewatched this pretty recently, towards the end of the summer. I gave this a rewatch, because I remember liking it a lot and being just so shocked by it the first time I saw it. Because I think this was actually the first film by him I did see. And I think it is a great introduction to his style, because it doesn't go too heavy into it, and it's a lot more like things happening, and it's a really good character study of like the deranged individuals he does like to put into his films, but this one is like more heavily and obviously deranged, while in like some of his other films, like The Seventh Continent, it takes a longer time to see that. And it's, obviously a very erotic movie, but erotic in the depraved sense. Nothing here is sexy. It's all very depressing. And I think the ending is one of my favorite film endings of all time. Just the way, I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but the way it ends is so fitting. And it does remind me a lot of, or The Black Swan is a lot like The Piano Teacher. I think The Black Swan, I don't know if it's based on, I know this is based on a book. I watched like a video on it. Haneke like says he never likes like adapting books or whatever for his work. This is the only adapted work that he's ever made, but for this story he felt such like a connection to it that he thought he'd do a good job with it, and he did do a great job with it. But it is like Black Swan, I feel like, is basically The Piano Teacher, but copied. I think Black Swan is still pretty good, but I think Piano Teacher is much better. Next, we have the Michael Haneke trilogy. I've only seen The Seventh Continent on here. I do need to watch the other two, Benny's Video and 71 Fragments of Chronology of a Chance. I hear those other two, especially Benny's Video, are pretty good, but The Seventh Continent, definitely a movie that is just so depressing. Like I said before, like this Seventh Continent, it takes a while to get into it, and that's kind of the whole point, watching these people, and then suddenly that switch happens. And I remember an interesting thing, I was watching an interview with him about Seventh Continent, and he was talking about how, like, he thought people would be more shocked at, like, the violence of fish, or, like, pictures, videos of fish dying, than what was happening to the humans, and he was right, which I thought, okay, but I acted the same, actually, because this poor fish, Funny Games, his most well-known work, probably the one that got remade into a shot-for-shot remake in English with Naomi Scott, right, that's her name, and Tim Roth, and Brady Corbet, who directed The Brutalist, which is supposed to be pretty good. And Funny Games is most like Haneke, one of his more Haneke-style films, but also very easy to get into. It's also got like that fourth wall aspect, which a lot of people like, and I think a lot of people kind of talk about, is it overdone, that fourth wall aspect, especially at the end. And I think it's done to a right amount, especially on the commentary he has on violence and violence in the media and how we do want to see that. I think that is the way to go, that fourth wall break when he's talking directly at us, because like he knows we want to see this, but how far are we willing to take that? And Funny Games, just a brilliant film. His framing, as always, really great. Violence towards children, very fun. He doesn't stray away from anything, It's one of the most like violent films, while also not being that violent, Like it shows some stuff, but not a lot also. And it kind of shows us how it really is all in our hands, what we want to see. So those are my Haneke films I have in my collection. Favorite director of all time. I hope he makes something again sometime soon. I know he's a bit older, so I don't know what's going to happen. Peeping Tom. a recent release to the collection. I got it because I like the cover a lot. I mean, the cover looks really great, doesn't it? I watched it. It's from 1960. Not that big of a fan. It's a bit older, so kind of has those older aspects to it of being a little like, a little like overacted. I thought the set pieces were really good, even though it did like obviously look like it was filmed on a set. Like it is from 1960, so I'm not gonna really like take that too much away from the film. But I think it is a bit overacted, especially the main German guy who just like acts like this creepy buffoon the entire film when no one even suspects that he may be doing something wrong. And I get the message, like the cycle of violence, and kind of similar to Funny Games, almost what we want to actually see on film. But I do think it is a bit boring. The romance in it is not very believable, and it ends kind of just like with a whimper. While it started off pretty interesting. So yeah, not that big of a fan of Peeping Tom. I think the cinematography is pretty good. The color, especially the color restoration on this, is really great. But overall, I'm not that big of a fan of Peeping Tom, even though a lot of people seem to like it, but that's just me. Next, Drive My Car. Risuke Hamaguchi, I think that's how you say his name. I just watched his newest film, Evil Does Not Exist, on the Criterion channel, and I highly recommend that. But I'm talking about Drive My Car right now. Obviously, it's an adaptation of Haruki Murakami work, and that is very well translated, especially dialogue-wise, into this film, except it's not as misogynistic to women, so that's a little better. And also, it's not just an adaptation of the one story, Drive My Car, from the collection Men and Women, but it actually kind of combines a lot of the stories into this one film, which I really like. Being a big fan of Murakami, that was cool to see. And in a 3-hour movie, it's kind of nice they pad that out. And of course, I haven't watched it. I've seen this film, I think, twice. I've seen it twice. And I haven't watched it in a couple years, so I do kind of want to see it again. But it is a very, like, a very character-driven film. A lot of it is just dialogue, them driving, him talking about his past experience. And I think it does a really great job at establishing these characters, especially the lady, and I forget their names in it. The Drive My Car woman. Especially her character is really well done. And the cinematography, of course, is great in all of Hamaguchi's films. And it's really just, a really, like, 3-hour movies. I think 3-hour movies definitely run the risk of staying too long and making you feel trapped in this world. But in this movie, it's very welcoming. You want to, like, stay in this world for even longer, It feels like a really well-crafted world, and that's a sign of a very good film, So, Drive My Car, very good film. Highly recommend. Need to rewatch it. Memories of Murder, my only Bong Joon-ho film in the collection. I think, no, he has Parasite in this in the collection, but this is the only one I own. Memories of Murder, one of the best detective movies. Also very influential, taking a lot of, like, cliches, from the detective genre, but also playing with it really well, subverting expectations, especially the ending, and just doing its own thing while heavily inspiring other movies like Zodiac, potentially. 2 DVDs on this, I forget why, but really great performances, great ending, and they found the actual killer in real life, which is kind of interesting for a film that's kind of left on such like an open-ended question. Like, my eyes can always tell. Well, can they? Apparently not. But really great film. Bong Joon-ho, Mickey 17's coming out soon, so I'm excited for that. Not too much to say, but just a really, great detective. Also some really good horror elements I found, especially in the scenes of, like, the girls being followed. I was, like, genuinely creeped out, which doesn't happen too often, I feel, in detective, like, serial killer movies. I feel like they sometimes run the risk of being a bit too procedural, but Memories of Murder really does capture, like, the fear people, especially young women, were living in at the time. Kind of like Silence of the Lambs. It kind of reminds you of that a bit. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. One of my favorite films of all time. 2 great performances from 2 even better musicians. David Bowie and, what's his other name? What's his name? Ryuichi Sakamoto, yeah. I love both of their music, especially the score for this film. The Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence song, one of my favorite songs ever for any film, and I listen to it quite a bit. I love the piano version and, like, the kind of synth-heavy version for this. And, I mean, the place where they filmed it, like, it takes place in, like, a little Japanese island or whatever, like, on a internment camp. But it's a very beautiful, like, location to shoot it. They have like the snow at certain parts and like the hot summer other parts. And Tom Conti as well, who played Einstein actually in Oppenheimer, gives a really like great lead performance, because even though David Bowie is like the main guy in this, he's not actually the main character. Even though he does appear in the film a lot, he kind of like represents the symbol of hope and standing up for what you believe in. While Tom Conti kind of like is inspired by that. And the way it ends as well, definitely like homoerotic undertones, which I think can be very heavily explored in a better video than this. But also kind of like, I wrote a review on it, I forget exactly what I said, but just kind of like the longing desire for something more, which is represented between the gap between these two characters. Both of them are looking for more, and Sakamoto's character takes it out on Bowie, you know. Really beautiful film. Nagisi Oshima, I have this collection from him. Oshima's Outlaw 60s. I have not seen any of these yet, so I cannot comment on any of them, but I'm got this at my local record store for like 20 bucks. And I was like, I gotta pick this up because I loved Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence so much. So I haven't watched any of them yet, but I have to get to that. But I loved Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, so I'm sure his other films are very good too. Next up, The Executioner. Spanish film, basically follows this guy who doesn't want to be an executioner, but he marries this lady, and her dad is the executioner, so he kind of has to take up that role. It's like a dark comedy, you know, because the whole thing is like, oh, I have to kill this guy, but I don't want to, and the whole movie's kind of like, oh, I don't want to kill him, but I have to kill him. Not that big of a fan. It's like older style of humor, so it's kind of doesn't exactly translate. Also like Spanish, so sometimes that type of humor is like hard to translate into modern day. But I'm not that big of a fan of it. I think it's okay. Kind of disappointed, but the cover is pretty funny. Next up, Todo sobre mi madre. I think that's how you say it. I don't know Spanish, but All About My Mother, Pedro Alvarenga. This was the first Pedro Alvarenga movie I think I ever saw, and I think it is okay. It's pretty good. It has a lot of like his hallmarks in this movie, especially the style. I mean, when you watch one of his movies, they're always very stylized, which I appreciate. And the main story in this film is it's not as memorable as his other films, but it is fun. I think the relationship the main woman forms with the other woman characters in this film is very heartwarming and very touching. I mean, he always has very strong female leads in his films, which is I appreciate a lot. You don't see that too much in modern... Well, you see it more in modern cinema today, but even like back in the 90s, it wasn't as prevalent. So yeah, a fun film. Not my favorite film ever. I think it's pretty good, but it's one of the first Criterion DVDs I actually ever bought, so it kind of holds a special place for me. Next up, La Ciénaga. I think that's how you say it. It's an Argentinian film. Also kind of about colonialism and the class system in Argentina. You know, like the white people versus the locals, the natives, I guess you could say. Obviously, we know, especially after Argentina won the Copa America this year, how they kind of reacted with those racist chants, and I think that film kind of perfectly encapsulates a lot like the white Latino hierarchy they feel. It's kind of like about this rich family who's kind of like wasting away on like this almost like swampy residence. Just like especially the film starts off with them just like, all like laying by the pool, barely able to move, and one of them like falls over and gets hurt, and they have to go to the hospital. It's a really great take on class, especially in Latin American culture, where it is a little bit different than the American culture of class, but also has a lot of parallels, so it's easy to spot out. And it's a film it's actually the director's debut, which is really impressive, but it's also very well shot. It's always very like cloudy and misty, kind of encapsulating this like decaying family, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It is a bit slow at certain parts, and I think the ending is a bit, especially with the kid, is a bit like undeserved, but it is still a pretty good film, very solid film on class. Next up, Y Tu Mama Tambien. Alfonso Cuarón, and obviously we have like two big movie stars in it who are kind of coming up at the time. Gael Garcia Bernal and Diego Luna. I got this film pretty recently. I enjoyed it. You know, I think it's a really good like exploration of sex and how that can sometimes ruin relationships, and how it can also make a lot of people come closer, you know, and kind of how that plays between people. I thought it was pretty good. Didn't really like the performance from the lead actress. I think it was a bit unbelievable at certain points, especially like with the age gap. But I do. Next up we have La Notte, one of the two Michelangelo Antonioni films I have. Michelangelo Antonioni. I've only seen two of his films, the two I do have in the collection. But just by watching him, you can tell he is a master at his work. And I do need to see more of his films. I don't know why I've waited so long to watch his other stuff. Kind of maybe in fear they're not be as good. But especially La Notte, one of the most striking films I've ever seen. The black and white here is really beautiful. How he plays with shadows is really captivating. And especially the performance by Monica Vitti. Just one of the all-time favorite performances in any film I've ever seen, ever. I've not experienced this in a movie before where, her first line, and I'm, already hooked entirely for the rest of the film. I watched it a couple years ago, so some aspects are a little foggy about it. But I think just, the main kind of, very looser narrative about this, couple's relationship and Monica Vitti just kind of cutting through it is really captivating. And, yeah, just a really great film. Now, Blow Up, the first Criterion DVD I think I ever got. This is the film that got me into collecting Criterion, so I can thank them for me spending hordes of money on this collection, more than I'd like to admit. But Blow Up, one of my favorite films of all time, one of the first films I ever saw that kind of made me dive deeper into Italian cinema and just more not as much mainstream cinema, you know. And David Hemmings, my favorite performance, I think, in any film ever. One of my favorite actors, David Hemmings. Very interesting guy. I think he's very not talked about enough, especially his contributions to film. But Blow Up, I think one of the best films about art and the importance of it and how we see art in our modern world. How we sometimes, a lot of times, do things we don't want to do to make the art we want to, especially in the world we're living in today, where artists have a very hard time making a living. And one of my all-time favorite endings as well. But just David Hemmings in this film, wonderful, really captures 60s England, London, and a time of unrest just across the entire world. You know, riots were happening all over the world, London, New York, Paris. Especially that one scene when he goes to the club and they're smashing the guitar. Just a really great adaptation as well, because I read the original story by Bolivar, and it is different, but I like his interpretation of it. Because, I don't think it's always the best when a director takes a short story or book and adapts it for because I could just go read the book. But when he plays with it, changes up some details, I think that is when an adaptation is better for me, at least. Next, we have Certified Copy, another one of my favorite films. ABS Kiarostami obviously made Close Up, probably his more famous film, Close Up. I watched that, I like that a lot too, but Certified Copy, one of my favorite films of all time, my top 4 along with Blow Up. William Schimmel gives an amazing performance for his first film ever, and one of his only films ever. He's in 5 movies, and he works with Kiarostami, Haneke, and then he's in some movie with Cillian Murphy, I think, which is kind of weird, or Cillian Murphy, however is his name. But Juliette Binoche, also one of my favorite actresses, also works with Haneke a decent amount in Code Inconnu Caché in his French films. And it's just a really interesting film, a film I've never seen before on relationships and how they change over time. And how when we meet new people, we're reminded of past relationships and how we're always kind of stuck in our first one or in our most memorable one, even though it's been gone for so long. It's nothing like I've ever seen. The Italian countryside, they're in the Tuscan countryside, is a really beautiful landscape to watch the story unfold through. And I think it wouldn't work in any other place. Because, if they're walking around New York City, it's very bustling. The buildings aren't as pretty, obviously. But in this Italian countryside, it almost feels like a dream, a dream world. And that really encapsulates the film. It's almost like a dream, But yeah, I love this movie. William Schimmel, I love this man so much. He needs to be in more films. He hasn't been in a film for years, so I don't know what he's doing right now, but he needs to get back to it. Repulsion, not much to say about this. Roman Polanski, obviously. Bad guy, obviously. Not much to say about it. Didn't really like it that much. British film. I like it that it's in London, but I don't think it really has that much to say about anything. Barry Lyndon. Probably the best period piece of all time, if I had to say. Maybe. Stanley Kubrick, obviously, one of the best directors of all time. Full Metal Jacket's one of my best favorite war movies. Um, I've never actually seen The Shining. I know. I need to watch it. But Ryan O'Neal, I mean, he's been in a couple really good movies, like Paper Moon. I think that's the other movie. No, not Paper Moon. That's no. Um, Ryan O'Neal, not in too much. I think he's a bit of an underrated actor, but here he gives like a monumental performance because he really has to carry this character and make it believable, especially since he comes from like really poor to like poor upbringings to like this really rich lifestyle, then all the way back again. It's hard to carry that for like a 3 hour film, but he does an amazing job at kind of shaping this character, kind of changing it into something we wouldn't think possible, while also having like the like little hints of it at the beginning that he is always capable of this. A good really take on class and like rise to power, and just like a very authentic like world he creates, kind of similar to Godland, what I was talking about, but it really feels like you're back in this time period, 1975. Wow, it's kind of a while ago. And I mean the scene with him fighting his like son or stepson, I forget if it's like the older son. I mean, one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And one of my favorite shots of all time, like of Ryan O'Neal in the chair kind of slumped over when his son comes to challenge him to a duel. The cinematography, I mean, all Stanley Kubrick films is amazing, but I think this is his best shot film. Okay, we're getting into the American films now. To Sleep with Anger. Not much to say on this one. I watched it a couple years ago, so it's a little fuzzy actually. But Danny Glover, I do remember he gives a very good performance. I like the themes throughout it, but honestly, not much to say. Probably need to give it a rewatch because I don't remember too much of it. After Hours, Martin Scorsese. I think it's tied up there with The Departed as my favorite Scorsese film, especially since this is just like a different type of film from him. It's not like any film he's done before. And obviously Scorsese, his films do have a good amount of humor in it, but this definitely leans into it the most. And I think he'd do more, like, I want to see him do more comedies, because most of them are a lot more serious with, like, obviously humorous moments. But After Hours, I mean, the whole time I'm laughing and just saying, what is this guy doing, Great performance from Griffin Dunne, he's obviously in Werewolf in London, but he hasn't been in that much. Or at least he wasn't in that much. I mean, he's still alive, so I mean, he can be in more. But I think he's a really underrated actor. And John Hurd as well, who's in this. And they're both actually in Chilly Scenes of Winter, which I also have, which is another one of my favorite movies. But After Hours, great Scorsese cameo as well. I really like this little thing here. Great cover. Not too much to say, but a really fun time. Scorsese's most like fun movie. Very low stakes in like the scheme of things compared to other ones. Thief, James Caan. I haven't seen it yet. I really want to, so nothing to say on that yet. But I have bought a decent amount of DVDs where I haven't seen them, but I do need to watch them. Ghost World, a really fun film. It feels almost like Wes Anderson-ish, kind of before Wes Anderson. Especially Scarlett Johansson's performance. It feels like she is in a Wes Anderson film. And it's a very fun film as well. Obviously inspired by, or adapted from the comic, which, I mean, you can tell from the cover is like the same style as the comic. But very much almost like a Alexander Payne film as well, like just like people, really bad people in like suburbia just trying to live their life. Steve Buscemi gives a great performance as just like this weirdo who falls for like a teenager, and they do a good job of humanizing him, but also making him look like a complete idiot. And the main girl in it, what's her name? I forget the actress's name. Thora Birch does such a good job at playing this completely awful person. I mean, she is evil. To me, at least. Well, yeah, I think people would agree that she's evil. But Ghost World, very funny. I enjoyed it a lot. Terry Zigwoff, or whatever you say his name. He hasn't made too many films. I don't think he directed the film with Paul Giamatti about the comic. No, he directed Crumb, I know that. But I need to see more of his films, although he hasn't made too many. This was like his most mainstream film, easily. And it was really good, so I don't know why he didn't get to make more. Chilly Scenes of Winter. One of my favorite love stories. I guess you could really call it a love story because the entire film is him remembering how his girlfriend was so great and how he's a loser, lonely man now. John Hurt gives one of my favorite performances of all time in this film. it's kind of like the film I like before I saw it. Like it's a film that like I didn't even know I needed. I didn't even know I wanted. You know, but after watching it, it has like all the hallmarks of a movie I really like kind of like unrequited love, got be creepy loser type of guys, but also having some redeeming qualities. 70s. I really like the 70s aesthetic in a lot of films. Even like just like the covering, it's like him staring off in the background is really funny to me. It's a really great like anti-romantic comedy, as it says in the back. But I mean, I love the film. It's also directed by Joan Micklin Silver, so it's kind of like this guy's basically an incel, a 70s incel, but it's directed by a woman, so it kind of like understands that and it plays with the character a lot and pokes fun at him a lot. Which with like another director, I feel like it could have fallen in the category of being more of an incel type film rather than having like an incel character. But yeah, really fun film. Pretty low stakes. Just this guy being like, man, I want my girlfriend back. This sucks. I hate my life. And I really do like the ending. Like the ending originally was different. I'm not going to spoil it, but I'm happy they chose the other one. Next, Around Midnight. Haven't seen it yet, but it's like a very jazz-inspired movie from what I've read. So, and it takes place in Paris, so it's always good. So excited to watch it. Looks good. David Lynch films. Lost Highway. This is a film I saw a couple years ago, so it's still a little fuzzy in my head. But Bill Pullman gives a really great performance. I really liked him in this. I think he should be in more, personally. And Patricia Arquette. Her name Patricia, right? Yeah, I'd go with that. I mean, she's just also very captivating in this film, kind of being that woman that he'll never get, the kind of thing with it. And after watching like the first time, it's definitely like, wait, what's happening? But when it ends, it kind of all wraps it together in a really great way that does make sense. And I think if it ended differently and a little more open-ended, I think it'd be a bit of a lesser film because it would be a lot more confusing, even though like, okay, I didn't get it. But the way it ends, it ties together things really well. And Balthazar, what's the other guy's name in this film? His like, the other main character. Now I don't want to spoil anything, but it's really like great, like two like split in half film. Kind of similar to Mulholland Drive. It's kind of like one half of it is a dream. And cool like Richard Pryor cameo. He's in there for like a minute, and it's not really even addressed, which I think is pretty funny. Blue Velvet, first David Lynch film I saw, still my favorite. I mean, not much to say, but Dennis Hopper gives a career best performance in this film, and I quote him basically every single day. Amazing. Mulholland Drive. I got the 4K edition, so it's thick. Haven't watched this film in a couple years too, but I think I've seen it twice, and I mean, Naomi Watts, that's her name, not Naomi Scott, as I thought when I was talking about Funny Games. But Naomi Watts, I mean, career best performance, and it's kind of like started her career too, and it's kind of disappointing where her career has gone, because it never really gotten to the same heights as this. I mean, this is easily the best movie she's ever been in. But yeah, one long dream, and in the movie Blue Velvet, the whole like song is in dreams, but I think it would have fit even better in this, because in dreams you're mine all the time. A love story in the city of dreams, yeah. But yeah, really fun, not fun, very like, at certain points like very scary, even though like it's not even trying hard to be scary. Like it's not even trying to be scary, but David Lynch's style is so distinct that I got spooked a lot. And I mean, Los Angeles in this film has never been worse. Like I just still never want to live there or even go there. Like I'm good. Never want to go over there. But yeah, David Lynch, I mean, one of my favorite directors, very funny guy. Not as humorous as his other films. Like his other films, like Blue Velvet especially, is actually pretty funny. This film is very dark, except the Billy Ray Cyrus bit. I mean, that's just like fucking, I don't even know how I thought of that. But yeah, Mulholland Drive, probably my second favorite Lynch film. Ghost Dog, Jim Jarmusch. Haven't seen Ghost Dog yet, but I really like Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law with Roberto Benigni and Tom Waits, or Watts, however you say his name. I love that film a lot, but need to watch Ghost Dog, because I do actually really want to watch it. It looks very much like a film I enjoy. Velvet Underground documentary. Haven't watched it yet either, but I know with Todd Haynes, is it, that directed this? Yeah, Todd Haynes. I mean, I love Todd Haynes, so I'm interested to see what he does with the documentary format. But I mean, I'm listening to Lou Reed's Transformer a lot right now, so I feel like that's going to get me in the mood for that. So I feel like I'll watch that pretty soon. Exotica. I just rewatched this a couple weeks ago, and it's gotten even better on rewatch. I mean, just like such like a film you start watching, you think it's gonna be like very sexy and erotic, and it takes like a complete opposite turn. You know, because even while the like erotic things are happening, like these like lap dances going around, it has just like this like it makes you want to throw up, especially knowing the ending. Yeah, there's a main character guy. He's like in this cycle, you know, and he doesn't want to break it, obviously. But what happens when that does break, you know? And what's his name? The Ilias Kostias, I think that's how they say his name, who's also in Crash, gives an amazing performance here. And that line towards the end, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Before they, you know, the climax of the film, just the way it's delivered is so amazing. And Anton Yogin, I need to watch more of his films. This is the only film by him I've seen, but always a good time to watch a Canadian movie. It takes place in Toronto, But Bruce Greenwood as well, one of his best performances of his career. And it's a really good movie. I like movies that are kind of like very like on the line, teetering of thriller and being like going over that realistic line and having like one act of violence that kind of spurs on things, like one initiating act that kind of changes the status quo. I think Exotica does that really well. And kind of the biblical implications in this of like the whole Adam and Eve is really interesting. It's a lot to dive into that I haven't completely thought about yet, and like very rewatchable. Yeah, Do the Right Thing. Haven't opened up the box for this yet, but I have seen it before, and obviously I think one of the best film Spike Lee ever made, one of the best films of the century, one of the best films of all time. Like, there's nothing like it, and the way it inspired like a generation of filmmakers is just like crazy, you know? Like, obviously it takes a lot of inspiration itself, but the way it was able to take that and turn it into its own thing is really impressive. And Spike Lee, his best direction, his best performance in any movies he's ever been in. He's not been in a lot of his own movies, but the ones he has been in, this is the best he's acted. And it's kind of better to, like, you know, in the film he's kind of like a passerby, you know, he's never acting exactly. He's always like kind of drifting. And, you know, he's told, do the right thing, and he does that by doing nothing. At least towards the end. And it's kind of question, is that the right thing to do? It's almost like it should be like, do the right thing, question mark. You know, it's kind of like a question in all of it. And Danny Aiello, amazing performance. I know he was nominated for an Oscar. I forget if he won or not, but I think he deserves it because, wow. Need to rewatch it because I saw it a couple years ago. But I mean, the love-hate. Awesome. Sex Lives and Videotapes. I'm not actually a big Steven Soderbergh fan at all. I think he jumps around genres almost too much, and his style is not even, like, unique enough, you know? It kind of just feels like he takes whatever opportunities he can. And in a way I respect it, because he releases a film, like, every, like, other year he'll have a film out, which I respect. He's obviously, like, really into film and very passionate. But also I think he's kind of has, like, a muddled filmography with a lot of movies that really don't have anything to them, that don't mean a lot. But his debut film, Sex Lies and Videotapes, is just amazing. I was floored while watching this. I mean, this is like one of the first films, obviously not the first film I've seen of James Spader in it, but like his first kind of like leading role, and one of my favorite performances of all time. Also, Andy McDowell plays like that kind of sheltered, you think like more sheltered housewife at the beginning, but kind of breaks out of it at the end. Very convincing. And it connects these like four characters really well, all through this like camera and these videotapes. And it kind of explores the relationship of sex and the taboo around it, and just kind of like that desire for a real relationship, a real feeling. An amazing debut film. I think his best film, Soderbergh's best film easily. And I wish he made more films like this. Next up, Punch Drunk Love. Paul Thomas Anderson, the only Paul Thomas Anderson film that I have on DVD. I don't know if more of his films are in the collection. But not too much to say about this. I really do love this film. It's really great for him to make this more like laid back, more simple approach to filmmaking. Which, I mean, around this time he made like There Will Be Blood, which is kind of like the complete opposite. Like, it's very grandiose, like important film. Well, this feels more like, just a good time, kind of like this like side story almost. But I mean, for the main character, this is like his life starting, and that's really beautiful. Adam Sandler, I think his second best performance of his career. I'll get into that in another film soon. But also Philip Seymour Hoffman. My favorite film was Philip Seymour Hoffman performance, even though he's not even in it that much. But I mean, like the phone call scene when he gets so pissed off, when he's like, "Wait, wait, wait, wait." It's one of my favorite moments in film. And the outtake of him like falling off the mattresses and like hurting himself is really funny as well. But yeah, a really great this romance movie, very unconventional, but also following a lot of like simple plot beats. But the way it's directed and it's acted is very unconventional, and it makes it feel very unique. It is very unique, and Emily Watson I think gives a very like not as like well recognized performance. I think it is really great and works really well in the film. Minding the Gap. Don't have too many documentaries in this collection. I like documentaries, but it's kind of like I watch a lot more fiction. But a really good like documentary that focuses on normal people, and how skating connects them all. Not too much to say about this, but the scene of one of the guys visiting his father's the grave is really moving. And I watched this like 2 times in a row, like back to back, day to day. I think that says a lot. One of my favorite documentaries. Next, Moonstruck. Haven't seen this film in a while, but I saw it was in the collection, and I loved it a lot when I saw it, so I had to buy it. Not too much to say about this one either. Just Cher gives a really good performance. I think her best performance of her career. Not exactly a hard thing to say, but captures like that Italian family really well, New York really well, and Nick Cage gives a very fun performance in it. Very like lighthearted. Probably one of the more lighthearted films I have in the collection. Just like a good time. Next up, The Graduate. I saw this film a long time ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, so I don't have too much to say about this, but Dustin Hoffman, obviously a good actor, not a great person, like a lot of people are actors from this age, but a very fun film. I mean, the whole film is like basically a Simon and Garfunkel soundtrack, which I enjoy. Lost in America, haven't seen this one yet, but I have seen Modern Romance and Defending My Life. I forget what it's called exactly. But I'm a big Albert Brooks fan. I think he's very underrated. I think back in the day he was more well known, but today I don't think he's talked about enough. But excited to watch this one. I got it pretty recently. Crash. Yes, I rewatched it again recently because I just love it so much. David Cronenberg, my favorite Cronenberg film. Kind of the perfect Cronenberg film. Even though, like, he's known for, like, the body modification, body horror. And this is kind of the horror of being in your body, and being in this world that's changing so rapidly, that's becoming even more disconnected from nature, even becoming even more disconnected from, like, human desire. And, it's not his most violent film, not his most, like, disgusting or, like, The Fly or whatever, when you see those like changes in his bodies and you're freaked out. Crimes of the Future, where it's like very heavy on like this cool like body horror, and the body horror is like in the ordinary in this. I think it's interesting they have Holly Hunter's name on the front, which she's not really in it that much. But yeah, James Spader. I mean, he loves playing a freak in this, and he gets freaky. And Elias Kostias also is really great in this film. My favorite performance, one of my favorite performances of all time. I love the movie so much I had to read the book, and I actually prefer the movie, so sue me. I love the book. Is really great and gives you kind of like a deeper dive into these characters' psychology, philosophies, or whatever. But yeah, Crash, favorite Cronenberg film. I mean, just really great in like where we're going as a society, because I think it's even more prevalent than it wasn't then to now. Don't Look Now, haven't seen it yet, plan to. Next up, my 2 copies of Uncut Gems. There was like a crease on this one, and I got another one for free. They sent me one for free, so I was like, oh, okay, so one's open, one's not. Really great, probably the last Safdie brothers film, which is pretty sad, honestly, but I mean, they ended on a very high note. I mean, Adam Sandler, best performance of his career. And it's all just like trademarks of a Safdie film. Very quick dialogue, very fast, shaky camera, and just kind of everything, all this tension coming up and just exploding suddenly, I think Kevin Garnett, best performance by a non-actor in recent memory easily. I think probably Sean Baker's films kind of rival that ability of the Safdie brothers to take these like non-actors and not very experienced actors and get really good performances out of them. But yeah, Uncut Gems 2019 was such a great year for film, and it should have won more or nominated for more at least. Dazed and Confused, Richard Linklater. I'm not the biggest Richard Linklater fan, but I did enjoy Dazed and Confused a decent amount. It's just kind of like a fun film, you know, kind of capturing the 70s really well and that kind of last carefree time of these kids' lives. I mean, there's a lot of like actors in this that kind of like went on to do bigger things, you know, like Matthew McConaughey, Adam Goldberg, others probably. This guy's in Empire Records, which I didn't like at all, but that guy's in it. Yeah, not too much to say. It's a pretty like laid back, fun film. Being John Malkovich, Charlie Kaufman is one of the weirder directors out there today, and that one of the weirder ones still working. And this one, it wasn't directed by Spike Jonze, but Charlie Kaufman wrote it, of course. And just a really great performance from, what's his name? What's his name? The dude. John Cusack, yeah. Really good performance for him. And, what's her name? I'm forgetting all their names. Catherine Keener, yeah. Which, she kind of plays a character that she doesn't play too often. But yeah, especially the ending is very funny, and bringing in Martin Sheen's kid. I'm forgetting names right now. But yeah, not too much to say, but not my favorite film by Kaufman, written by Kaufman, but it is a good time. Silence of the Lambs, not too much to say about this, because, I mean, what else is there to be said? But I've seen it before, but I haven't opened the casing yet. But Anthony Hopkins, amazing performance. I really want to watch Manhunter, because Brian Cox plays the same character, so I kind of want to see how his take on it. I think it's like, he won Best Actor for this film, obviously, but, I mean, he was only in the movie for 20 minutes, so I think it was like the shortest amount of time someone has won Best Actor for being in a movie. But yeah, really influential, especially with Longlegs just coming out. It was obviously very heavily influenced by Silence of the Lambs. Similar to Memories of Murder as well, it kind of put them in the same category of horror detective. I think they balanced that really well. Rushmore. Wes Anderson. I'm going to say it, I'm not that big of a Wes Anderson fan. I think the more he dives into his style, I think the more annoying it gets for me personally, but Rushmore is one of his earlier films, and it kind of is at that waypoint where it's not fully in there, but it's kind of like on the edge, and I think that's when he's operating at his best, when he's not indulging into himself too much. And yeah, it's a really fun film. Schwartzman is great in here, and the British woman, Olivia Williams, is pretty good too. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Didn't like this really at all. Just too fucking much for me, man, I guess. Friends of Eddie Coyle. Robert Mitchum, obviously, one of his last performances. And I mean, it captures that really well because it's like this like aging mafia guy who's kind of on the edge of getting kicked out of his business. And I saw this one like 4 years ago, I think, so it's been a while. But from what I remember, it captures the 70s really well, like very just like dirty and sad, you know, especially Boston. It's always very wet. And this is a very fun film. Not fun, kind of depressing, but it's good. Devil and Daniel Webster. I actually got this one today. It's like the older version. They released a newer version of it with this other title, All That Money Can Buy. But this one's from like 2003, so it's the oldest one I have. But probably one of the oldest films I have, also just like when it actually came out back in, when did this come out? 1941. I mean, it's a good film, but I mean, also just like very odd and surreal for its time. I mean, like Daniel Webster comes up from the past, like obviously a very important figure in American history, and at the end they like put the devil on trial or whatever, and they have like American like and historical people, like Genghis Khan comes in, then Benedict Arnold, and they call him a traitor. Very funny for its time, and also very, very influential. Kind of like takes the devil and kind of puts him in like this like own like this is the devil right here, and he plays like this big weird like bum type of character. and it's a really good like Mephistopheles type character. The Thin Red Line, Terrence Malick, right? Yeah, Terrence Malick. Honestly, it's just okay. I think Terrence Malick isn't exactly best fit for a war film, and at certain points he does really well with it, and other points it is a bit dragging, and it's a bit slow. Based off of a comic, which is kind of surprising. But it's a really great cast as well. Just like all the heavy hitters on one thing, and none of them really have that much screen time. Like some of them just die out of nowhere, and that's kind of funny. But not honestly, I'm not that big of a Terrence Malick fan, honestly. And for some reason, when I bought this off eBay, the cover is like sticky, so kind of annoyed about that. But I mean, it's okay. Not my favorite film. Summer Hours. Not much to say about this. I think it's Olivier Assayas. Assayas, yeah. Olivier Assayas, which I liked his Irma Vep miniseries quite a bit. But Summer Hours, honestly, I kind of forget what happened right after I even watched it. It's like a very like laid back film, very like human, but honestly, I don't think it's that great or anything. But I like Juliette Binoche a lot, so put her in a film, I'll watch it. L'Humanité by Bruno Dumont. He also did La Vie de Jesus, which I liked quite a bit as well. I think that kind of takes his style and he does even more with it, and he's much more ambitious, and I think he also accomplishes and says more with this film. Really liked it. One of the first films I saw was a really close-up shot of a vagina. I don't know why that's just kind of what came to mind whenever I think about this film. Not in a weird way. But the police detective in this film is kind of like any detective I've seen in any film before. Like, obviously you have that, like, trope of the police detective being kind of sad, alcoholic. In this film, he's just kind of like this, like, almost like a baby, almost. Just very, like, cuddly. He has very sad eyes. And the whole, like, case he's following and the connections are really interesting. And I remember a decent amount, but I do definitely need to rewatch it. But the ending is very interesting and has a lot of different interpretations, which I like. Next, Beau Travail, Claire Denis. I watched this film a while ago. I mean, it was just a cover. I'm not like, ooh, so hot. That's not why I bought the cover. But I think the cover is really captivating, kind of capturing like the body versus like the actual character of the person. You know, their face is cut out, but you can see their body really clearly. One of the best endings of all time, him dancing to Rhythm of the Night, is just I rewatch it like once a week basically, and I do need to rewatch the film because some of it is a bit hazy. But I really like Claire Denis as a director. I think she has a lot of interesting stuff for the camera. It really captures this guy's Denis Lavance like slow infatuation with this guy Gregory Collin. I think that's his name. So yeah, I need to rewatch it. But really great like queer cinema, while also not being like too on the nose about it. You know, there's no like really like heavy gay sex scene or whatever, which I'm not like against or anything, but really great. Like it's like a war film kind of, but not exactly war heavy. La Piscine. Honestly, I like Luca Guadagnino's take on A Bigger Splash more. Obviously, very influential film. Alain Delon gives one of his best performances, even though he's like a prick in real life and he died recently. Really well shot. Not too much to say about it, but I like Luca Guadagnino's A Bigger Splash more. La Haine. Very inspired by Do the Right Thing. I'm gonna make sure like, this came out first, right? Do the Right Thing. Yeah. It's basically like Do the Right Thing, but French, you know, which is not a critique at all, because it does it really well. I mean, it kind of kickstarted a lot of these careers. Mathieu Kassovitz, Vincent Cassel, Saeed Taghmaoui, I think that's how you say his name. I haven't seen it for a couple years, saw it a couple years ago, but it's just kind of like that film you watch, and you're like, this is an important film, and it knows it's an important film. And I think it has that confidence, it needs that confidence, because without it, I don't think it'd be as good. But yeah, a great film, French. Mathieu Kassovitz, who also is like the main lead in Amélie, which is kind of funny. I kind of laugh at that. Next up, the Trois Couleurs Collection, 3 colors. This was like over $100 if you buy it online, but I saw it at my local record store for like $15. So I was like, I gotta buy this. even though I'm not really interested in watching all these films. I've seen Trois Couleurs Bleu, with Juliette Binoche. I think Juliette Binoche is actually in all of them, which, I mean, say enough. But Trois Couleurs, I thought Bleu was okay. I think it's like a good, decent story on grief, but not super memorable. I do need to watch the other ones. I think people say Red is the best one. So I gotta give the other ones a chance. I'm sure they're good. The Vanishing, one of the best horror films ever done, even though it's not like directly horror. You know, a lot of it is shot like during the day, and there's no like direct horror like scenes, like a jump scare, like him waiting in the corner behind. Just the whole concept is terrifying, and the villain in it is one of the most like messed up people put to film. I've seen this film twice. I watched it originally and I rewatched it like 2 years ago maybe. Just like they did an American remake, which obviously sucked, but by the same director, which is kind of interesting. Kind of like how Haneke did Funny Games again, but he made the other one a lot more Americanized, which is a shame. But yeah, Vanishing, great horror film, but also not directly being too heavy on the horror. Triangle of Sadness. Haven't opened it yet, but I have seen it. One of my favorite films from the year 2022. Just like obviously very on the nose on wealth, you know, and all that. So some people kind of like take that as a bad thing. But I mean, it's if you look at it from the lens of a comedy, it's just very good. You know, like sure there's like the critique on the social classes and stuff like that. But if you take it like too seriously, it's not as good. But if you take it as more of a joke, I think it works a lot better. Especially, you know, the like 20-minute puking scene. I saw it in theaters and I just could not stop laughing. I do think it drags on for a bit long, especially the second half of them, you know, stranded or whatever. But I think it is better than a lot of people say it is. And Harris Dickinson, I think, gives a really good performance. I don't see how he's going to top it, honestly. I think it could be a career best performance already. But he's in Baby Girl, that's coming out with Nicole Kidman. That's supposed to be good, so we'll see. Next up, Worst Person in the World. One of my favorite films of 2021. Joachim Trier. I say his name. He's from fucking Norway. But yeah, really good film. Renat Revedit, how do you say her name? Renat Reinsev. She's going to be in that movie A Different Man with, what's his name? The guy from, who's played, the guy, yeah, you guys know. But yeah, just like a really kind of like simple slice of life story about this woman just kind of like trying to navigate her life that, you know, kind of may seem messed up, but it's really just kind of like a normal life. Yeah, really fun. I think it should have won more Oscars because it really is a great film. Very funny as well. It's very easy to watch. Next, A Fire by Christian Petzold, another Janus contemporary film, which I watched originally on the channel rather than watching the DVD. But I was kind of like bored one day and I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, it looks pretty good. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think there are certain aspects of it that are a bit cliche and kind of like it brings up a lot of ideas and don't necessarily go all the way with all of them. But I think the main performance by Thomas Schubert is really good. I think he draws like a fine line between like incel and kind of like lonely, likable guy. I think it's kind of easy to lean into one, but I think he does like a good balance of the both. And that ending also is like very, very sad. Also very uplifting also at the same time. Good movie. We're down to our last two. Ooh. Both Wim Wenders films, or Wim Wenders, however you say his name. First up, The American Friend. One of the first Criterion DVDs I got. Bruno Ganz and Dennis Hopper, two amazing actors in one film. And honestly, when I watched it like 5 years ago, so a little fuzzy, but I remember not enjoying it that much. Obviously, it's like a thriller film, another good take on like Thomas Ripley. But from what I remember, just I think it's kind of flat. I don't think it does anything new with these characters, with this genre, but I honestly have to give it a rewatch because I haven't seen it in so long. So still kind of jury's out. The last film I'm ending on, a film I just watched the other day for the first time, Perfect Days. I absolutely loved this film. Wim Wenders, I forgive you for making me watch The American Friend. That wasn't that bad. I'm being a little dramatic. but just such a peaceful film. You know, a film I especially need to watch all the time. Just kind of like take in the little things, enjoy the little things. I mean, it makes you want to be a toilet cleaner, and making me want to do a toilet cleaner is a very hard thing to do. And I mean, it pulls it off. I mean, it's not like the film's goal is not to make you want to be a toilet cleaner, but I mean, it shows how good and impactful it is. Where I see this guy's life, and I'm like, I want to be a toilet cleaner. I think like it does a very good job at not like overplaying his emotions and diving too deep into his past. Obviously, there's that scene where his like sister comes up and we kind of get a hint of what his life was like before. I think that's just enough, you know. And it's a good take on like the routines we build and how they kind of shape our life, and how like the slightest, you know, misstep from that can really shake things up and make us look at life in an entirely different way. And the ending, I'm still like out on the ending on what exactly it means, but I think one of the most impactful endings I've seen in a long time. And I mean, it took me a while to watch it. It came out in 2023, but one of my favorite films from that year, and honestly, I liked it more than Anatomy of a Fall. I think it should have won Best International Picture. But those are the films from my collection, all